It's been described as a mass cyber heist, data stolen from underneath companies' noses, and now on a hacker's website. A warning in broken English. The gang, called Clop, boast, "Chances that we download a lot of your data as part of exceptional exploit." As well as the boast, an ultimatum was issued to the dozens, maybe even hundreds of organisations affected. Get in touch with us to discuss a ransom payment, or we'll publish your data online. The BBC, Boots, Aer Lingus and British Airways are just some of the organisations we know about. The scale of this mass hack has really shocked the cyber world. It all started with a relatively obscure but popular piece of corporate software called MoveIt. The Clop hackers managed to find a unique way into the system, and that gave them access to all the companies that use MoveIt. For example, the UK payroll provider Zellis. That allowed them to download some of the data of Zellis' customers, including the BBC and British Airways.
We begin tonight with a significant cyber attack taking place across the nation and around the world. Federal agencies, state governments, and major universities have been hit with a campaign of data theft and ransomware. CBS News has confirmed that the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is providing support to agencies that have been targeted. Johns Hopkins University and its health system says the data breach may have impacted sensitive personal and financial information, including contact information and health billing records. Now, there's no confirmation about what group or country is behind the intrusions, but U.S. intelligence believes a criminal organization operating inside Russia is responsible.
A senior U.S. government official told reporters there is no evidence to date the U.S. military and intelligence agencies have been compromised, but a number of federal agencies have been hit.
Tonight, senior government officials are racing to limit the impact of what one cyber expert is calling potentially the largest theft and extortion event in recent history. American targets include multiple federal agencies, including the Department of Energy, plus Johns Hopkins affiliated hospitals in Maryland and Florida, Georgia's statewide university system, and the Minnesota Department of Education. British Airways was also hit. Officials say the hackers are part of a cyber criminal gang called Clop, believed to operate from inside Russia.
They've started releasing some of the data that was stolen as part of their work to extort these companies. We strongly encourage anyone who is a user of this software to, of course, patch, lock down their systems.
The cyber criminals are exploiting a software program called MoveIt, which companies and government agencies use to transfer data, including personal information. The group steals the data, and in this message believed to be from the hackers, warns that if a ransom is not paid, after 7 days, all your data will start to be published, sometimes on the dark web. Cyber expert Brett Callow says foreign adversaries and criminals will be looking to leverage the data.
The FBI and the government's cybersecurity agency last week warned companies to be on alert for this kind of attack. Former intelligence officials told CBS News the threat has been circulating for weeks, and they accused the U.S. government of being slow to act. Nora.
According to the city of Hayward, on Sunday morning, someone tried to hack into the city's computer network.
We were experiencing what we call a cyber security threat.
In response, the city shut down all of its online services, which includes the city-run website. They are now working with their IT contractor and law enforcement, including the FBI, to determine the extent of the damage and figure out who might be responsible. While the investigation is still in its early stages, the city believes this was a ransomware attack, where someone tried to seize the city's data and hold it hostage in exchange for money. At this point, the city does not believe the hackers were successful.
There's been no evidence of which we're aware of any data breach whatsoever, and our assessment and investigation continues. If we were to discover any evidence of any breach of private data of any city employee or any member of the public, we would contact them directly.
Even though
the Hayward City Council approving a local emergency at a brief meeting Thursday night. The declaration coming just days after the city was hit by a ransomware attack.
What it does is it allows our executive functions to work more efficiently, to be able to direct staffing, to acquire expertise, equipment faster than we normally can.
The cyber attack attempted to disrupt and hold hostage part of the city's networks and computer systems. However, city officials say, as far as they know, no employees nor residents' data has been compromised.
We are still responding to 911 dispatch calls, We are deploying police officers, firefighters, emergency medical personnel, our water systems running, our sewer systems running.
The incident comes just months after Oakland suffered a similar cyber attack. Experts say they're becoming increasingly common.
These are criminal gangs, most of them in hostile nations like Eastern Europe, Russia.
Huda runs a cybersecurity company. He says given the increased frequency of these attacks, local governments have to be prepared.
If you simulate that and do a drill, then you're going to be finding gaps and weaknesses and fix them before the actual thing might happen.
While the city continues to work on restoring all of its systems, it's urging the public not to panic, saying they're taking every step to ensure this doesn't happen again.
There's no security system that is completely invulnerable to penetration like this. We received notice of this within, hours of the event, and were able to lock it down.
If there is a silver lining to this cyber attack, it's the fact that it was discovered relatively early. That limited both the scope and the severity of the attack. That said, some folks who showed up early in the day in person to do business with the city still found it a bit challenging.
Melina Leahy ultimately left Hayward City Hall without being able to renew her business license as the city struggles to recover from a recent cyber attack.
I came here to renew my business license because I sell jewelry at the flea market, and I had went there. They told me you have to do it online because our system is down.
A spokesperson for the city says they first realized that they were the target of cyber criminals early Sunday morning and immediately shut down the city's website to limit their exposure. The city's website came back online around noon, but there were still signs like this posted around City Hall, warning employees not to turn their computers back on until further notice, a lingering after effect of the attack. Melina says it was all just one big wasted trip.
It's kind of annoying because I don't live around here. I live in Fremont.
And she was not alone. Paul Cotteridge came in person to check on a parking ticket.
The reason I came down was I couldn't deal with it online. I don't know if it was me being old school or this new snafu was going on.
A spokesperson for the city described the attack as ongoing and did not want to say exactly what security countermeasures they'd taken. Cybersecurity experts, however, say Hayward and other cities should not have been caught off guard.
They have this warning, this neon sign saying, you might be next. So you better be prepared.
Professor Ahmad Banafa says for small cities, school and hospital systems, the question is not if, but when they'll be targeted.
When you talk about cybersecurity, it's an investment. It is not an expense.
It's scary. I mean, you never really know what can happen nowadays. All you could do is hope that your personal information doesn't get leaked.
The real cost of a ransomware attack. The city of Oakland is still dealing with the issue affecting many who live there. But now, even more residents could have a price to pay. Good evening, I'm Amanda.
Officials race to get Oakland city services back in order. Recent history shows the potential price tag for this kind of problem can really add up.
Just take a look at two other notable attacks to U.S. city governments. In 2019, New Orleans was hit with a hack that ended up costing the city around $5.2 million.
Then, a month later, Pensacola, Florida dealt with one that racked up about $375,000 in costs. Now, keep in mind, those are two much different populations.
Good evening. Those are moments where both city officials say they would like to forget. Pensacola had a lot of their systems already backed up, but New Orleans had to rebuild almost all of their computer systems. It was a process they say took a long time and cost a lot of money.
We started to notice access or actions happening against privileged accounts.
Kimberly LeGroux says it was one of the most frustrating days for the city of New Orleans. In late 2019, she says they were hit with ransomware.
We were without any city services, and the city fell back on manual processes.
LeGroux says it took New Orleans 10 days to get some of its systems up and running and a full 20 to get everything restored. She says they did not speak with the hackers and they did not pay the ransom. Restoring their system, LeGroux says, ended up costing New Orleans over $5 million.
Our best course was to sanitize as much of our data as we could, recover from clean backups, and rebuild our environment on clean PCs.
Oakland City buildings remain closed with computers not working. LeGroux says with today's technology, a cyber attack can happen to anyone. A neighboring city to the east echoed those same words.
We all came in and our computers, a lot of them had signs on them and said, do not turn on until you consult with IT.
Casey Lagarde with the city of Pensacola, Florida, says they ended up spending nearly $400,000 to fix their systems following a cyber attack. Similar to New Orleans back then and Oakland now, their services were not working.
some of the online bill pay systems that we have and our email services and just our website, things like that.
She says it took a few weeks to get their systems restored. Lagarde and LaGrue say after the attacks, they invested more money to prevent them from happening again. They say other cities should do the same.
You can never be too careful, right? And you can never be too sure. I sleep a little better knowing that we are constantly making those investments.
Human error or cyber attack. The Federal Aviation Administration blamed a corrupt computer file for the system outage that caused the halting of all U.S. flights last week. But one cybersecurity expert believes the outage could have been a cyber attack. Says that outages occurred both in the U.S. and Canada on the same day, and he believes the incident is highly suspicious.
These systems have redundancy. They have backups. They have ways to be able to recover. So when I hear that there was a database error, and then as you said, there were two different systems that went down on the same time, I'm like, okay, saying it was human error keeps everyone calm. But in reality, it really does sound like a cyber attack and that something went wrong that was unplanned for.
Okay, if it was a cyber attack, who may be responsible? I mean, right away we think Russia because of the war against Ukraine, the Canada and the U.S. are supporting.
Yeah, I mean, Russia lately has always been on the list, but we also forget that China is also a big target, especially when it comes to critical infrastructure. And there's also a lot of freelance cyber adversaries that are out there that are really big on ransomware, extortion, and things like that. So from my standpoint, it sounds like what we call a test attack, where they wanted to test and just see how vulnerable the systems were, whether they could get in, and how long it would take them to recover. So to me, the critical part for the FAA right now is to really figure out if it was a cyber attack, to figure out how they got in and make sure they fix it, because this sounds like it's going to be one of many attacks in our future.
The FAA software, as you know, is 30 years old. Why is it at least 6 years away from being updated, Eric?
When you're dealing with critical infrastructure, like air traffic control, utilities, and even hospitals, uptime availability is critical. And anytime you patch or update a system, there's a chance it could crash. I'm sure you've had it at your home when you did an update or they said, oh, it's just a basic patch. All of a sudden things don't work and things stop operating. So it sounds bizarre, but the more critical a system, the less we update it, the less we patch it, and the more vulnerable it becomes.
So how likely then is another shutdown or cyber attack, not only against an antiquated FAA computer network, but other critical government networks? Just how vulnerable are they?
Unfortunately, they are very vulnerable for that reason you said. These are old systems. They're not typically updated. They're not typically patched. And the big problem is they're starting to be interconnected. And that's where the problem comes in. These systems were designed and built to be what we call in cybersecurity an air gap, which means completely isolated from any other system or the internet. But what's been happening over the last year or two is they're interconnecting these to the internet and other systems to make them easier to use. And because of that, this to me is just the beginning. And this year we're going to see a lot more of these attacks happening because of that.
Did that happen with remote work because of the COVID shutdowns?
That was one of the big drivers where this whole work from home or work from anywhere, now all of a sudden you had systems that needed to be accessible if somebody wasn't in the office. There were systems that needed to be monitored, like the FAA systems, when somebody is not in one of their secure facilities. So yes, that was the trend that started it. And instead of us weaning away from that, now that people are coming back in the office, we're actually doing more and more interconnectivity, which is great for ease of use, but is one of the worst possible things we can do for cybersecurity.
So how true is it then, I want to go back to this, that most Russian hackers are concerned about extorting money from companies, schools, other networks, pledging to shut them down and destroy their networks if they don't pay up, and then Chinese hackers who may be more interested in stealing secrets and sensitive information?
That's very spot on. We can usually guess with a high reliability who's doing it based on those symptoms. And then we have to remember that Iran, Venezuela, North Korea are all recognizing the value of cyber attacks and how vulnerable our systems are. So they're also starting to launch these attacks for the same reasons. Most of them tend to be more monetarily driven. China is really the one that's focused a lot on intellectual property theft, but there's a lot more players that are targeting us just because of how easy and simple it is to do.
Steamship Authority says it did not pay a ransom after it was hit by that cyber attack earlier this month. The attack impacted ticket and booking sales online. Most operations have been fully and safely restored. The Steamship Authority says it has implemented new safeguards to existing systems and protocols. The incident is still under investigation.